Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Annie.
I'm so excited to be here, Dalton.
I am too. You got to remind me. I know I took a little bit. There's a little bit of a lag there, but you got to remind me how we met.
Okay,
Was it through Matchmaker FM? I got to put the FM on there.
we met through Twitter.
Oh, that's
So,
right.
yeah, because
Yes.
um, David Rock, aka D Rock, he
Yes.
and I have crossed paths for years. I
Oh,
live
wow.
about 10 minutes away from Gary Vaynerchuk's store wine library. And
Oh,
so I have I first read Gary Vaynerchuk's books years and years ago, and he always does appearances at the store, and so and before he was huge, you could really kind of bump into him a little bit more. So I did, and I got to know David Rock, and so he and I follow each other on Twitter, and so then a few weeks ago, David Rock was like, "Who's got a podcast? Who needs a guest? Who wants to
yes.
cross paths?" And that's how you and I crossed paths.
Yeah, that's so cool. I do. I follow D Rock. I follow Gary Vaynerchuk. Never had, and I've been a part of like his Discord, and I just love like what he does, and I follow a few of other people like that. But D Rock is cool because he'll post every once in a while like what does everybody need, and his Twitter feed just blows up. But that's cool, especially because I don't mind where my guests come from, and I think the more unique and the more diverse the lineup on the show is better for everybody, and I think that's really cool. And so now, from our conversation before we hopped on this podcast, you own Downstage Media that helps, so it gives marketing strategies and helps engage audience for Broadway, right?
For theater, for off
Theater.
Broadway, for Broadway. Yeah, I mean, anywhere. I like to say the performing arts and nonprofits, because if
Okay.
it's a touring show, if it's a dance studio, if it's a nonprofit for the arts, if that's really kind of
Hmm.
where I fall and what I love. I would say 80% of my clients are in the performing arts space. And then
Hmm.
I have a bunch of clients that are outside of that are doctors or lawyers or editor
Oh,
in
okay.
chiefs of magazines or whatever. But mostly people know that if they're going to be engaging with me, there's going to be some theater talk.
Okay. That's great. So then you do have like other businesses that hop in there. You mentioned doctors and lawyers and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. So now the big question,
Mm,
is so you got into marketing. How did
yeah.
you get into marketing? And then how did you decide that performing arts and nonprofit art, was the kind of the niche that you would find yourself in?
Well, it was really almost the other way around. So
Okay.
I was a professional actor for about 15 years. I
Oh,
was in a
wow.
show in New York City that would perform 4 and 5 times a week. And I was looking for a little bit more control than the actor's life gives you.
Okay.
And at the time, I was in an improv show on 53rd Street. And we would oftentimes get these corporate gigs, they're called. So, like, if you've ever been involved in a company and they have like the big company meeting, and sometimes they'll have performers there to lighten the mood a little bit or to go in between the big CEO's speeches, then often, so that might be me, right? So
Oh, wow.
I would perform there with them, or sometimes like if you've ever had improv training, so that way you could get out. You probably, Dalton, had this as like a sales
Oh,
guy,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Have you ever had like improvisers come and say like, here's how to get out of your script and blah blah, and listen, active listening,
You know
any
what?
of that?
Yes. I haven't had them come to like I never had the company do it, but I've attended some seminars and like webinars that do bring that, like how do you make the script your own? Yeah, things like that.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was doing that one time, and I was backstage, and there was this marketing guy who was on stage, and he was talking about this new thing called Twitter. And I was backstage and I was like, are you all listening to this? Because I think that we can use this to get more people to our shows. I
Hmm.
think that this could be a really good tool. And again, this was like more than 10 years ago, like when Twitter had just started.
Hmm.
And I became really fascinated in social media because it was just a new way of letting people know about your shows, of spreading the word about your shows.
Hmm.
So I really decided to dive in deep. And then, a couple of years later, I realized that I didn't want to live the life where you're waiting for your agent to call you, and then you do an audition and you're waiting to get a call back, or you're waiting to get the gig, or whatever it is. And I knew I wanted a little bit more control. So I decided to take a lot of online classes. That's where I started following Gary Vaynerchuk, because
Hmm.
he gave at the time so much practical advice for how you are able to use social media like the right way. And of course, he had his books and stuff like that. So I just really went down that rabbit hole. And I
Hmm.
started then. And so then other people were like, you seem to know a lot about this. And I've got a show opening up, or I have a book that I just wrote. Can you help me promote it? And it really grew from there. And then I started Downstage Media when both of my kids were in school 5 days a week. So you have kids, so you know what
Hmm.
that's like. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a big difference between when they are in school and when they're not in school regularly. So
Absolutely.
the first year that's why my company launched in September, because that's when my kids started school. And so yeah, and I just, at first I wasn't sure. I just thought, oh, I'll just do social media. But then I realized I was also doing some writing for a online news publication called Yes Broadway. And I realized then that I knew more about theater than most people do. I had gotten my BFA in theater from NYU. I knew theater
Oh,
inside
wow.
out and backwards. So that's when I was like, you know what? I know a lot about theater. I am learning a lot about marketing and social media marketing. These are the people I know. This is the world I know. Let me just put these two aspects together and
Hmm.
really, really lean into that. So that's how I decided to make the performing arts my niche.
Wow. That's an incredible story. I think I think the best part about that is a lot of people really thought that, like, well, and Twitter specifically kind of like went up, and then it had a big fall off, and now it's kind of like Twitter's kind of back, I feel like. I think
I
because a
think so
lot of like what's
too.
going on with Facebook, and really what's going on with LinkedIn. I don't know how you feel about LinkedIn, but I can't really stand it that much. I get on there just to like see what's going on sometimes.
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, I like to grow on two platforms. I like to build an audience on two platforms that
Okay.
aren't owned by the same company, right? So I feel, as a
Mm,
one woman show, as a solopreneur, I don't have time to build more than that. So I focus
that's
on
fair.
two, and I try not to make them owned by the same company. So not Facebook and Instagram, for example.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
because I wanted to diversify. So, I keep LinkedIn there, but
Hmm.
I know what you mean. I kind of feel like it's like flossing. I feel like LinkedIn is like flossing. Like, we do it, we
Because you
have
have to.
to.
Yeah.
We don't love it, but we know it's good for us.
Yeah.
But I
I've
think
just
you're right
found.
with Twitter. I think a lot of people are very wary, and rightfully so, of
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram. And I think that they just want no part. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people have aged out of Facebook.
I
Um,
think so. Yeah. I think so.
or more, not that
I
they've
think.
aged out, but like Facebook has aged. Like, Facebook hasn't attracted younger audiences.
Yeah.
So, Facebook is there. And then I like, for me, I oftentimes think like, oh, maybe I do want to start building on Instagram again, because there's so many fun features. But then I think, I don't trust Meta a whole lot. So
No,
I
I
don't
don't
know if
either.
I want to put myself in their world any more than I have to. And that's why I think it's really interesting, like Twitch and Discord
Hmm.
channels and Slack, and even Slack. I mean, obviously those aren't necessarily social media channels, but I just think that there's a
Sure.
lot of places to spend your time and build a community and be a part of a
Hmm.
community without necessarily Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a good point. So let me ask you this. You just mentioned that you like to build audiences on platforms that aren't owned by the same company. Is
Yes.
that intentional in the sense that you teach that to your clients as well? And if you do, what does that strategy do for people?
Well, yes. So I absolutely tell it to people because oftentimes I will. So with Downstage Media, we offer three different tiers. So there
Okay.
is a do it yourself option where we will set you up with courses to learn how to run your business, to learn how to market your business, to work on your messaging. We have a done with you option where it's sort of a 45-day marketing live stream arts accelerator, we call it, where in 45 days you can get your marketing all squared away. And then there's a
Hmm.
done for you option where if people are like, I don't have the time, please just do it for me. And then I just say, yes, I
Yeah.
will happily do so.
Yeah.
So anyway, with the DIY or with the done with you, that's oftentimes where I'm sort of sharing with people how they can build. And I will oftentimes say, don't first of all, so many people think they need to be on so many different platforms and you just can't build very well. It's just too time consuming.
Yeah.
So I like to say just pick two and then build your email as well. So
Oh,
two
okay.
social media platforms and email.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. That's okay. That makes sense.
so that's yeah. So because email you own. And the reason I want to diversify is because so for example, this past June, I was working on a launch for a nonprofit that's called Places Please, and it is designed to help people who are in the theater who are trying to come back to New York City who can't afford to come back because they weren't able to work for a year and a half. And so we kind of help them out with rental assistance. So big press, all of the people on the board except me had been nominated for Tony's. Like, this is a big deal. And this is a big launch, and we're all really excited. So awesome. We get a ton of press. And the day that we launch, we get kicked off of Twitter.
Whoa.
I have no idea why. We have less than 100 followers. Anyone who would go onto our Twitter handle would get it was like warning, there might be a problem with this content. Like it was crazy.
Whoa.
And I was trying to figure out why. And 5 days later, Twitter sent an email and said, oh gosh, we're so sorry. Sorry for any disruption this may have caused. It's like, oh, duh.
Yeah. You're like, what the heck?
Right,
Holy
exactly. But I
cow.
feel like if that were Instagram, say, it's highly
Hmm.
possible that we could have been kicked off of Instagram and Facebook at the same time. And then we would have had
Yeah.
zero options. So what we did was we were building on Instagram and Twitter because we didn't have Twitter as an option anymore. Then we're like, okay, then we'll go Instagram and Facebook and just try to get those as much of those press articles out as we could, so that way we could get all the grants and blah blah blah. We had like this
Yeah.
$50,000 match, like it was a big deal. So we really needed to
Hmm.
get all that press out there. So that is one reason, just like being randomly put in jail, having no idea why. I was working with the editor in chief of a magazine who his account on Facebook got hacked. So he's the victim here.
Yeah.
And they got hacked and wanted to put up a ISIS flag. And Facebook flagged his account and totally kicked him off the account. And he's the main person who puts up all like, or who at least like runs the team that puts up
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
articles and all this stuff on the Facebook page. So the Facebook page for the magazine was also affected. So
Oh,
at any
dang.
time, even if you think you're playing by all the rules, you're doing everything right, you can very easily get kicked off of the platforms. So I find
Yeah.
it's really good to make sure that you're not building on the same platform or platforms that are owned by the same company. And you're always collecting email addresses, phone numbers, other ways that you
Other
have
ways.
control over. Because if you lose all those followers, they're gone. You have no way of
Yeah. Yeah.
contacting them.
Right.
So if you have their email address, if you have their phone number, then at least you've got an MMS list, you've got an email list, you've got something that you can work with. No matter what happens, you can take that with you. But if all of your YouTube subscribers go away, all your Twitch subscribers go away, that's it. And I saw that happen a lot with, I mean, Dalton, I'm a bit older than you. And so I've seen platforms come and go. I mean, I've seen Vine go in one night.
What the heck happened to Vine?
What the heck happened to
Vine? And it really was like almost overnight. Like that was bananas.
And there were people who had millions of followers on Vine. And it was only like
it was only like 2 years. Vine was only a thing for like 2 years.
Right.
I feel
and
like.
The people that was a thing. It was such a flash in the pan. And but there were people who had really built a following on there, and then that following was gone in a second.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Well, and your story reminds me of earlier this year when Facebook and Instagram shut down like the whole day, like nobody could post all day, like everything was off all day. And that was kind of a eye-opening experience for everybody, because it brings up what you just mentioned, which is like, you got to have an email list. You got to have people like cross follow you. But I think the email list was more important. That was like, if you wanted to, because if you wanted to get something out that day, like if you had a launch that day and you were on Instagram, you were screwed. It was it. And there was nothing you could do about it.
Right. Or if you had spent money for ads or whatever it was, it's not like, Meta was coming to people later on saying, we're so sorry.
Right.
Here's your ad spend back. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it is a good reminder. So I think it's important to diversify. And I always tell that to my clients, which nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to hear it because they all want to be on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
Oh, that's banana. I got off Instagram actually. I'm mainly on Twitter. Like that's my main, and Facebook and LinkedIn. Like those are my kind of main ones that I'm on.
Yeah.
I just couldn't, like, I'm fine. Like I do a podcast, like we have nice video, but I just, video was more time consuming for me than writing. And it wasn't like, I couldn't have figured it out, but I was like, writing for me was just more like, I also feel like Twitter, and LinkedIn are writing platforms. And, I wanted to kind of change my attitude towards social media. I wanted it to be like a good outlet, something I could learn. And like, if I'm writing down, if I'm scheduling tweets for the next couple days and I'm spending an hour writing, like that's good for me personally. And so I was like, it wasn't good for me to like sit in front of a camera and worry about how I looked or what's happening in the background or like, how am I going to edit this? Like, so I just got off Instagram. I was like,
right. Well, I'll often say to people, it really depends on where it depends on where your strengths are and where your audience is. So if your strengths, your audience and the zeitgeist, right? So there's a reason why we haven't talked about Snapchat right now, right? It's just not in the zeitgeist as much. If it plays to your strengths and it's where your audience is, then don't worry about the zeitgeist as much. But if you're kind of,
Well, I was just going to ask you, I'm not familiar with, is it zeitgeist? I'm not familiar with that.
Zeitgeist. Like what's the buzz?
Oh, okay. I'm like, oh man.
Like what are people talking about? What's the buzz? Where are people? So like right now, so a few years back, Snapchat was in the zeitgeist. Right now, TikTok is more in the zeitgeist, right?
Okay, that's okay. Okay, that's fair.
But now you know why I'm on Twitter, because I am a word nerd, and Twitter is a good place for that.
Yeah, Twitter's a great place for writing. Yeah.
It's a great place for it's a great place for stand-ups. If you are though, like, if you're an MC, if you are like charming and fun and witty, or if you're a dancer, if you have a dance school, there are many places where video is wonderful, especially in the performing arts. So you want to use video, or if you have music, if you're a musician, then you want to maybe do lives and have them on video, things like that. Then it's really, really important. But like you, I have found that it's not a medium for me, but I think it's really important to figure out what's going to work for you, what's going to work for your audience, and what's in the zeitgeist.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. And we were talking about, well, I had this question come up like while you were talking. I was like, I wonder if she talks about this with her clients, because I've heard of a few like social media marketers kind of run into this, and it's kind of the buzz, like chasing the algorithm. So how do you have that
Mhm.
conversation with people about, because I would think that you try not to chase the algorithm, but is there some like, because I don't think you can like 100%, but how do you have that conversation, and what are your thoughts on that whole process?
Yeah, it's really hard to chase the algorithm. Oftentimes, unless you're a professional marketer, right? Unless you're being paid to market your stuff, to
Yeah.
market someone else's stuff or your stuff, being consistent is more important than chasing the algorithm, because
Hmm.
you will find yourself spinning your wheels. How
Hmm.
that said, if you are going to lock in to just simply two platforms, then it might make sense to find whoever the person is that you trust to give you information about those two platforms. And then maybe every year, every couple of years, take an online course, brush up, just learn
Hmm.
about it, just so you have a basic idea of, okay, this is how the algorithms change now. This is a new feature. I didn't realize how I could use it to my advantage. Now I understand how I can use that feature better. Okay, great. But if you're running another business,
Hmm.
if you've got to launch your book, if you're going to launch your show, if you're going to do anything, and you're just trying to spread the word about your stuff, choose simply two platforms and go deep on those platforms, learn what you can, try to do like, some best practices, two or three, but don't freak out about them, because it's in the freaking out that you're either going to waste a lot of time or you're going to get
Hmm.
burnout so fast,
Yeah.
because you're going to be
Yeah.
doing the thing that you don't want to do. You don't want to be marketing your thing. You want to be doing the thing, whatever that is.
Yeah. No, and that's great. I think that's great advice, because I think people get lost in that. They want, um, they want 100,000 followers or whatever overnight, or they're like, this is gold. I don't know why people aren't looking at it. And it's more of like, yeah, it's more about consistent quantity and consistent quality, like over time, and letting people, because that happens to me a lot. When I find somebody I like, I'm like, ooh, I really like that. Somebody liked it on Twitter. You can see what everybody likes. Um,
Yeah.
and then you go in there and you're like, wow, I really like that one tweet. And then you find out they have like, they've tweeted 100,000 times. You're like, whoa, I can really learn something. This is a book by itself, right?
Right.
Um, or Facebook or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Whatever it is, right? Find
yeah,
find that thing. But
yeah,
if you're trying to chase the algorithm, if you're trying to chase three and four algorithms between Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, I mean, you're going to be chasing your tail.
yeah, absolutely. So, and it sounds like for most people, you mentioned, unless you're a professional marketer, it sounds like for most people, just pick two platforms, start putting out content regularly, and then go from there, and then just
Right.
start building.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. And then email capture and things like that. Go ahead.
Yes. Email is important for sure. Um, and putting out content and engaging. So by
Oh
engaging,
yeah.
I mean like reply to people. I took 3 months from August to like October of 2020, where I was not putting out any original content on Twitter. I was
Mm,
I was a little depressed. The theater industry was in pretty rough shape. I had to completely rebuild my company, because I had
oh.
been doing done for you social media before, and then all of a sudden people were like, we first of all, we don't have a show. We don't know when our show is ever going to go on again,
Hmm.
and we don't have the money to be paying extra people. So we don't need any social media right now. And that's when I really made the change from social media to digital marketing, because I realized
Hmm.
anyway, so many people didn't have the foundation that they needed. And then putting social media on top of it, just like if you don't have an email list, then you can have millions of followers. But again, you're going to be like, Billie Eilish that they just mentioned in the Times last week. She has millions of followers. She did not sell the amount of book sales they thought that she was going to sell. And everyone's like, this is so weird.
Well,
She has so many
yeah.
followers. It's like followers are different than buyers. They are very different people. So anyway,
Yeah.
so I was rebuilding my
Mm.
company, and I only replied to people, and I would either reply to people or retweet. And I used to have the stats on this, but I think I grew my followers by like 75%, and my reach was considerably higher.
Yeah.
And but really what happened was I started to actually get to know people
Hmm.
on Twitter. I got to know who they are. I got to know the stuff that they put out. Like Dalton, I know you love to put out so much about sales techniques, but then also empathy and how you say things versus what you say and how important that is. Like I started to really
Yeah.
understand who the people are that I'm following.
Yeah.
And I didn't want anything from them. I didn't want their email address. I didn't want them to buy anything. I just built relationships with people. And so
Hmm.
engaging and replying to people, replying to every comment, or at least your first 10 comments if you have a lot of comments, like just
Hmm.
let people know that they are heard. Like let people,
Hmm.
so take the time to do that. If you're on somewhere with hashtags, use the hashtags, like whatever it is. But I usually say like about 10 minutes a day, even if you do it 2 to 3 times a week, is really helpful. And then also consistently posting content.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not just
Absolutely.
putting out content, because I heard somebody say the expression post and ghost the other day. Have you ever heard this expression? I
No,
love
but
this
I mean,
expression.
It's pretty intuitive. Like
Right?
post
Like
and
it makes
ghost.
sense.
Like
It's like, oh yeah, post and ghost. I get it. Like, so you don't want to do that. You want to actually build relationships with people.
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so tell me, you brought this up. We're going to
Yeah.
talk about a few things before we go, but you brought this up that Billie Eilish hadn't sold the books that she wanted to sell, and you said followers don't equal buyers.
Right.
Okay, let's have that conversation then. If somebody's building an audience on Twitter, on Instagram, what do you do? Because yeah, because you're right, like on Instagram, what is it, like a 15% engagement rate? Like a 15%, if you have a 15% engagement, like that's pretty decent on Instagram. Is that
Oh,
what I
that's
remember?
excellent on Instagram. I just looked this up
Okay.
because I was just speaking at the National Arts Marketing Project conference last week. So
Okay.
part of my thing was engagement rates. The average
Yeah.
engagement rate is 0.7%. 0.7%.
Wow.
Yes. So
Okay.
the no, I'm sorry. That is for Facebook. For Instagram, it's 1%. So
Oh,
Hootsuite and We Are Social, every 3 months they put out a report. And so this is the one from October of 2021.
whoa. Yeah,
It's
I was gonna say,
shockingly low.
so yeah, so like 10% to 15%. Like if you had that on, like
You're
I
doing
had like a
great.
thousand, yeah, I had like 1,000 followers and well, on Instagram before I left, and I would get like 20 to 30 likes, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'm right there. That's it. But that's who's supposed to be seeing it, and so um to think that like you could, the stats that I heard when I was really going deep on Instagram before I kind of bailed on it because I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Um,
Mhm.
but the stats that I was looking at were like, you have like a 5 to 10, maybe 15% engagement on your post, and then maybe only like 1% or less than 1% will actually do something about the post. Like, will actually
Right.
like accept your call to action,
Sure.
which I thought was bananas. So how do you? So what else do you throw in the mix to engage with your followers, to get them to interact with something that you're selling? Because I mean, some people do, right? Like you have a book and something good, and you want your followers to buy it, but only 5% of your people are even going to see the offer.
Right. So there's a couple of different things. So the first thing is, so I'm hearing you ask a couple of questions. One of the
Okay.
first questions that jumps out is, how do you get people to engage?
Okay.
So a lot of times what I like to do is I talk about 5 different content buckets. Um, I have a Facebook group called the Performing Arts Entrepreneurs. And so we just did a 5-week series about what kind of stuff to put in your what in your content buckets. So
Okay.
one of those buckets is just engagement posts. These are just fun posts. They're polls, they're open-ended questions, they're fill in the blanks, they're yes, no questions, they're this or that stories, all of this kind of stuff that's just out there to get your audience to engage. This is good because you want your audience to not feel like they're always being sold to. But also, when they engage with your content, then they are more likely to see your content the next time around. So that way, then another one of those content buckets, 20% of the time, is when you actually ask your audience to do the thing, or you actually tell your audience about an event you have, or a lead generator that you want them to download, or a
Okay.
thing that you want them to buy, right? So that's what happens another 20% of the time.
Okay.
So 20% of the time, let's just keep it easy. One day a week, if you're posting 5 times a week, one day a week, you specifically do an engagement post. Another day a week, you do what I call promotions, initiatives, events, right? That's another day a week. Another
Okay.
day is, I like to say, like long form stuff. So, like if you wrote a blog post, if you like this podcast episode, I would put in that. If you are sharing an article that someone else wrote, like something long, so like long form curated content, that's another
Okay.
bucket. Another bucket, the fourth bucket would be just general stuff, problem solving, obstacles, mythbusters, memes,
Yeah.
just sort of generally helpful stuff. That's going to go in there. And then the fifth bucket, like the fifth day of the week, could be just anything random.
Yeah.
So that's what I like. That's how I like to have that mix. And if you're doing that consistently, then you're getting people to engage. And it's good that you're getting them to engage, because then a couple of days later, if you're going to ask them to do the thing, to buy the thing, to download the thing, you've already gotten a little bit of engagement from them. And then
Yeah.
meanwhile, other days of the week, you're putting good stuff in front of them. You're putting good articles in front of them, general helpful tips, tricks, info, that kind of stuff. So you're only selling to them 20% of the time. So that's what I find really, really helpful. And then also being very strategic about whatever the link is that you're pointing people towards, right? So like Instagram only gives you certain links at certain times. A lot of people default to their website. Well, it doesn't have to be your website. You can tell them to
Yeah.
go to the place to download the thing, right? So
Yeah.
it's sort of using then what you do have strategically as well. So that way, when they are encountering you in other places on that platform, they're still finding out about the stuff that you do.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I like that. And
I'm
so I
glad,
like that.
Delton, that you like that.
but I think it's cool because a lot of people get so caught up. And so when you get to hear a professional like talk about this is what you should do, because there's so many like noises out there of like, no, this is how you post on Twitter. No, this is how you post on Facebook. Like, don't do this, do that. Right. And so it's very refreshing when you just get to hear somebody just, okay, this is what you should do.
Well,
On a podcast.
there is a lot of noise out there. That's why I really try to only follow a couple of gurus, right? And
Oh yeah.
so because there's so many people out there, they are so smart, they know so much information, and I think that they're all great. Anyone who is putting stuff out there, I'm sure that you're very, very good at what you do. But
Yeah.
if I focus on too many of them, I'm going to be pulled in too many different directions. So
Yeah.
I usually at any time, I'm probably only really keeping up with 3 different thought leaders in my
Okay.
space, because otherwise it's just too much and it's too confusing. And then I start to doubt myself and blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, nope, this is what we're doing. I'm following these people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I do the same thing. I posted on Twitter about that the other day. I'm like, here's a few people that you could follow for good sales stuff. I like to follow people that I don't agree with. That's what I like to do. Because I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Because I learned when I was learning how to write like business writing and like copywriting, one of the things that they taught in copywriting was that the couple courses I took and classes I went to was good writing is good editing.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, if you want an instant idea, like go follow somebody that disagrees with you, and
Mm-hmm.
then
I
because
see.
like, you know what I'm saying, like,
It's a quick
because if
prompt,
you,
right?
yeah, it's like, oh, like you're wrong, like now you have something to write about. Like, all
Right.
right, cool. But I like it too because then it keeps me. I like to say it like keeps me honest. It makes me justify why I believe the things that I believe, and to me that's important to
Smart.
make sure that, because you get in this rut of like you mentioned earlier, like, so I believe that to be successful in sales you have to lead with empathy. So some of the people I follow believe that you should just not necessarily do the opposite, but
But that you're
more
leading
of
with
like a,
something else.
yeah, leading with something else. And so if I get caught in this rut, like, oh yeah, I just do what I always do, but then I see something like that, I'm like, no, why do I think that that's wrong? Why do I think that I'm right? And it just kind of gets it going, and I've changed a lot of my thoughts doing that way, but it's
That's
good for me.
so smart. You know what that makes me think of? My husband is a songwriter. And
Oh, cool.
so my husband's one of those people that his mom was a professional piano player. He started playing piano when he was 4. He plays
Wow.
piano, bass, guitar. Like we have a whole setup in our house. And there's
Cool.
instruments all over the walls, like everywhere. And so my husband knows a ton, not only about songwriting, but about music theory and really understands the language of music.
uh,
Meanwhile, his songwriting partner doesn't know music as deeply as he does. However, when
mhm.
they're writing songs together, one of the things that I think is really working with how they create together is that my husband might say, well, I think it should be this lyric and we should do it and it should sound like this. And then his partner will say, well, are you sure? Does it have to be? And then just in asking that and thinking that, then he'll really say, no, it does have to be that for sure. And it really helps
Okay.
him understand, like, this is why this has to be, and not just take it for granted that
Right.
his musical instinct or his lyrical instinct or his melodic instinct is the way it has to be, but actually that it's a justification and a reason. So I can understand by following a lot of people
Hmm.
who have a differing point of view to yours could then help you to understand, like, yes, but this is why I believe this because blah, blah, blah. And here's why I think it's
Right.
going to work. And here's the data that I have to back it up and, whatever it is.
Yeah, well, and a point to bring up, one of the things that you wanted to talk about was how anyone can learn marketing and business by looking to Broadway, right?
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, and that's a perfect entry to like that topic, which is, because, and I follow a lot of people to like sharpen my sales skills. I follow a lot of people who aren't in sales. I follow a lot of people who hate salespeople, right? And I don't really
Right.
know what that means because, like, in my view, we're all salespeople. But I'm curious, and you know what? You got my attention, so I'll listen to you. And I'll kind of like, so what do you mean? Like, why don't you like that? Um, but I really do think that your perspective can widen when you go into other, like we were talking about before the podcast started, when you go into other avenues and you explore these different things. So tell us how people can learn from marketing by looking to Broadway.
Well, okay. So I think that when you are marketing a show, you need to fill seats. It's very quantifiable what needs to happen. Not
Yeah.
only do you need to fill the seats that one night, you need to, like, I'm working with someone who has a run of a show that's coming up this upcoming summer, and it's 10 weeks. So 10 weeks of filling a
Ooh,
theater 4 times a week, right?
whoa.
So there's an urgency there. And if you don't
Oh my
sell
goodness.
those seats, then your audience is going to be looking at empty seats. Your audience
Yeah.
is going to feel that awkwardness that there's only, and this is, again, this is also like one of the reasons that I got involved with marketing, because
Hmm.
as I said at the beginning, the show that I was in, I was like, guys, I think we can get more people to the show. The show that I was in would oftentimes cancel if there were less paying audience members than people on stage. There were 5 people on stage. You would be shocked at the amount of times that this show canceled. It was brutal. And not only that, but the times that they didn't cancel, when there were only 6 or 7 or 8 people in the audience, that was worse. So if you can think of whatever it is that you are selling, right? If there's a new service or a new product in your product line, or if there's a new something, and you could think of it like, this is something that we need to get people here. If you have that urgency, and if you create a date, right? So with shows, there is an opening night. That night does not change. Like, the fact that it's been malleable because of COVID is really shocking to the industry, because that never happens. You have your opening night, and that is the night your press is coming. Like, all of this stuff is happening. It goes up on that day, whether or not it's
that's
perfect.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what so many different businesses can learn from, that if this is your launch date, it doesn't have to be it's never going to be as perfect as you want it to be. It's never going to be completely ready. That moment in a show to translate to your business, that page on your website, that part of the lead generator, that email that you have in your email nurturing sequence. I mean, I'm talking about all marketing stuff, but of course it could be whatever it is that you have in your business. You, of course, know all of your different businesses, listeners. But it's that thing where if you think we've got to fill the seats, and also theater makers know how many seats there are. So they know how much money they can make. So if you were to think to yourself, I want to sell 100 of these, and I want to sell 100 of these 4 times this week, right? Because I'm going to have a 4-show week, or, Broadway is 8 shows a week. But when you start thinking of it that way, then you start having a much clearer sense of what your sales goals are, what your revenue goals are. And if you were to start to think of it the way that theater people do, we've got to fill these seats. We've got to think of it like we've got to fill these slots. And what can we do to get people excited for this? What's the kind of stuff that we can be doing to get the word out over and over and over again, and get people excited about what's happening and show people why it's relevant? Then that, I think, is something that is universal, that anyone can learn from in any of their businesses. But another aspect that I think is really lost, and that so many businesses could really learn from as far as the performing arts is concerned, is the idea of putting on a show.
Yes.
And I don't mean like being inauthentic, but what I mean is like, you go to a show, and people on stage, even if they're just doing like a pre-show speech, they look nice. They look nice for that show. There is something, there is a polish to that show. Those people know their lines. Those people are ready. Their costumes look sharp. Their wigs look good. Their mics sound good. So if you put that same attention to detail and the customer's experience, the way that in the theater we think about the audience's experience, that can really transcend your business, because you start thinking, instead of, this is what I have to do, this is my business, this is the thing that we're selling, but really say, what is the experience that we want our customers to have? Then you start to really change things, like when theater does it right, the second you walk into that lobby, you already have a sense of like, oh, this is going to be a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is going to be cool. Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Okay, they're doing it there. Oh, look what this is a big deal. And if you can think to yourself, like, what are the elements that what are the elements of theatricality that I can bring into what I'm doing to really, so if I don't know, if it's a dentist's office and you want your audience to feel, you want your patients to feel a certain way when they come in, how can you do that? How can you make them feel that way?
Ah,
Right?
interesting. Yeah.
So
Wow.
I think that
Well,
there's so much to learn that way.
there is so much to learn that way. I mean, I have a couple things as you were talking that I was writing down that I was like, yeah, that's a really good point. When you're talking about putting on a show and you're talking about everything is right, that's kind of what I teach salespeople or like small business owners who have to sell something. Uh, is like that confidence. And so how do you bring that confidence to yourself? Because one of my favorite quotes for sales, or one of my favorite sayings, is competence breeds confidence.
Hmm.
And and well and then confidence, like, people judge you off that. Like, so Amy Cuddy wrote a book called Presence, where she said people judge you off of two things. They judge you off of warmth and competence. And so I would take warmth to be that confidence level. And by the way, they judge you more on warmth and confidence than they do on competence. So
Yeah.
like, so do they know and do they care? And people care a little bit more about how much you care than they do about how much you know.
Right.
Or at least I'll have to go
Well,
back and read the book.
I
That
mean,
might be.
they want to know that you know what you're doing, but
Yeah.
they also want to know, does this person get it and can this person fix it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, because like and that's been my experience in sales, like where I've been in a situation where like I might be new to the company and I might be new to the product, and they'll give you a little leeway on it if they can feel that you're genuinely interested in helping them solve a problem. You know what I mean? Like if you're genuinely there to help, they'll give you a little bit of grace on product knowledge. If you're honest about
Right.
certain things, you know what I'm saying? They'll give you a little bit. They won't give you a lot. Like I've had salespeople. You got to know something. You can't just say I don't know the whole time. But they'll give you a couple if you genuinely care. And so I like that. So putting on a show, like, how do you want them to feel, and and
Well,
things
and
like that is
also,
very
like,
important.
what you're saying makes me think about when we would do improv, right?
Mm.
So I used to do a 90-minute show. I had no idea before the show began what I was going to do.
90
And
minutes?
yeah, it was a 90-minute show. It was me and three other people
Wow,
and a
that's
piano
awesome.
player. And we would tour around the country, we'd go all over the place, and we'd get
Wow.
suggestions from the audience, and we would use that to fuel our show. And it's not fun for the audience has fun when they can see that you're struggling a little bit, but they need to know that at the end of the day you're a pro. So like this whole idea
Yes.
of like not
Yeah.
knowing what we're going to do on stage, that feels okay for the audience because they know that you're going to take care of them, that you're actually a professional. It's not like we're going to put someone on
Yes.
stage for 90 minutes who's never done this kind of thing before,
Yeah,
right?
because that's cringy.
Because then it's cringy, it's painful. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants that. But
Right.
they like seeing you on the tightrope a little bit if they
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that you can handle the tightrope. And so I think that also comes into play quite a bit,
Oh,
that
that's a good point. Yeah, that's cool.
that you can
Yeah.
really think about your audience's experiences and saying, look, I've got this. I'm
Oh,
a
yeah.
I'm a pro. I've got this. You're going to sit back and we're going to let you know what's going to happen. You're going to have a great time. You're going to have a great time
Yeah.
tonight. And if you think to your buyers, to your customers, how can we make it so that way they're ushered to their seat, right? Can you let them know? Like, just even think about the whole ticket
Mhm.
buying process, right? You get your
Yeah.
ticket, you walk into the theater, somebody says to you, you're going to go right over there. You're going to go up to the stairs. You're going to head up to the second floor. Think about then in your business with your marketing, if you have a plan, it's like, first, we're going to do this. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about it. Then I'm going to give you an estimate. And then afterwards,
Mhm.
we're going to get started. That's not that
Mhm.
much different than saying, okay, you're going to go up to the stairs. You're going to find the usher there who's going to give you your program. And then you're going to sit down in seat D3,
Mm.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So all of those kind of elements that make the audience feel safe and in good hands, you can use that in your business. You can use that in your marketing to have the same transformative experience that people have in a night at the theater.
Yep, that's it, huh? That's great. Wow. And you know what? That
And now
reminded
you
me
won't have to
because
go to the theater. And now it's a tax write-off. You'll go to the theater, write off your tickets because you could be like, I'm doing this for my business.
you can, and that's totally legitimate, by the way.
I,
But it did
yeah.
make me, because one of the things, yeah, you do, and well, just what you outlined is something that I teach and I do as a salesperson, like, and that's very important for customers, to line out exactly how this is going to go down, and next year we're going to do this, and because another thing I learned from psychology is, and kind of the psychology of sales and the psychology of people is everybody's telling themselves a story. And if you're not helping them with that story, the story they tell themselves is always worse than the reality of the situation. So you gotta always be like helping control the narrative, and control isn't the right word, manage the narrative of the situation, right?
Mm,
And it's by doing that. It's by like, all right, here's what's gonna happen next, here's what has happened, hey, here's, you know what I'm saying? Kind of
yes.
leading them and managing that. Because like I said, the story that someone tells themselves is always worse than the reality of the situation.
Right. Because if you were to say to me, Annie, direct a movie, I would be like, I have absolutely no idea. I don't know where I would
Yeah.
start. There's no way I could do that. But if
Yeah.
you gave me a book that was like 10 ways to direct a movie, like 10 steps to directing a movie, I have such delusions of grandeur all the time that I would be like, oh, I can totally do this. Yeah, I can
Why
absolutely do
not? Let's see.
this.
Well, you mentioned earlier to not, oh my goodness, it just flew out of my head. But yeah, like one of the things that you were talking about, I actually wrote this down, was opening night. Treating
Right.
every opportunity, like when you said that, I was like, oh man, people should treat every opportunity like opening night. Like done is
Love
better
that.
than perfect. Done is better than perfect. You know what you got to do. That's what I did when I wrote my book. I wrote a little sales book, and by little I mean it wasn't.
Don't say
Yeah,
it's
it was
little.
just a little bit. It was a
My
little,
word.
not long though. But I heard somebody say that you could do pre-orders on a Gumroad, and I was like, all right, December 1st it's going out, no matter what. It
Boom.
doesn't matter if I have one chapter written or if I have 15. It has to go out. And that was actually one of the coolest experiences of my life. And it was that what you described, but I like the way that you described it better. I'm probably going to coin that, and we can both use it. Anybody can use it, but treat
Okay.
every opportunity like opening night, because
Yeah.
that's a cool thought.
And then when you think about that, and then you think about how when a performer does 8 shows a week and they
Ooh,
have to make every show feel like opening night,
dang,
right? So you
that
think
would be a
about
tall
that.
order. Yeah,
That's a tall order. And that's what theater professionals do every single week, week in, week out.
yeah.
And so think about then. So yes, if you think of your launch of whatever it is as an
Hmm.
opening night, but then if you think about every time that you're in front of a customer, every time you're in front of a patient, as that is another, like, that's another show, that's another
Yeah.
opening night. And
Hmm.
you think about, and it's hard. You build up
Hmm.
stamina, right? You have to do that.
Hmm.
I mean, luckily I was in an improv show, so I didn't have to worry about saying the same thing over and over again. But I would just think about, people who are in Phantom of the Opera or people who are in long running shows that just are
Yeah.
saying the same things and doing the same things over and over again. And every night they are making it fresh and they are finding new things and they are making it alive and exciting for their audience. And if
Yeah.
you can hone that for your audience, every social media post being excited about what it is that you're doing, excited
Yeah.
about what it is that you're doing for your customers, or excited about what your customers are discovering from
Yeah.
using your products, right? All of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. And if you can bring that enthusiasm and excitement, even if you have to, manufacture it a couple of times because it's a Wednesday matinee and you're really, really tired.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. I know it's like where you are. You've been more than generous with it. And I really appreciate all of your insights and coming on the show. And before we sign off, I want to give you the opportunity just to tell us about your business a little bit more, where people can find you, how they can get involved if they want to do that.
Yeah, so you can go to downstage.media, and I actually have a a video that I made the other day, which is 5 marketing missteps most artists make. And
Oh wow.
I have to be honest. Just people make them, like business. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be artists. Like, don't tell the
I'm sure.
artists, because
Right.
artists are very sensitive. But anyway, if you go to downstage.media slash arts dash accelerator. So if you go to downstage.media
Okay.
slash arts dash accelerator, you're going to find that, and how you can download the video to get that, to find about those 5 marketing missteps most artists make. But, again, don't tell
Cool.
the artists.
All right, cool. Well, hey, thank you so much, Annie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Dalton, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.